Welcome to video number 5 on my new podcast channel. This is the podcast channel where for the first 10 videos, I'm recording them to upload them in order to then delete them. You might be wondering why that is the case, but it's simply because for a long time I've been trying to get into YouTube, and what I want to do is to exercise the muscle of recording, editing, and then publishing videos so that I'm not overthinking things. If you've ever thought about starting a YouTube channel, then you'll know it's very easy to overthink things and you're wondering about audio, camera quality, background, what you're going to talk about, how you present yourself, a billion different things, podcast, YouTube episode, YouTube video titles, and thumbnails and all of that kind of stuff. Now, my whole background is podcasting, which is why from time to time I mention about podcasting instead of YouTube videos, which is a little bit off-putting. But hey, I'm still in that motion of exercising that muscle of recording YouTube videos, as well as still recording podcast episodes. Now, in my last video that I published, video number 4, I was in Vietnam. You may or may not know that at the moment there are some slight conflict issues going on in the Middle East. So the video numbers 1 to 3 were in Dubai. Video number 4, I managed to escape the country. I got to Vietnam, which was great, spent a week there, bounced back to Dubai. I was only there for 2 or 3 days, and now I'm in sunny Romania, actually at my in-laws' house. So there's nowhere suitable inside to record, and so I'm in the garage recording one here instead. That's not what this video is about at all, though. This video is all to do with if you were starting a podcast and you are wanting to try to decide how to get into podcasting and what your podcast should be all about. But before we talk about that, let's just talk about this podcast, this video channel, this YouTube channel for a moment. This is called Authority After 40, and it's for experienced professionals who want to show up in life when they're on camera with greater presence, with greater clarity, and with greater authority, so that when they are speaking, maybe that's on a Zoom call at work, maybe that's on a podcast, maybe you need to record a video of some kind for work, maybe it's a straightforward Teams conversation with your boss. It's just a way that you can present yourself in a better way. That's what this YouTube channel is all about. I keep wanting to say podcast channel. It's just a force of habit. So if you're wanting to start your own podcast channel, one of the first questions you need to ask yourself is whether or not you want to start it for work or purely for fun. If you're starting it for work, then the things you need to consider will always be completely different to if you're starting it purely for fun. And the first question I'm going to challenge you with is something that might actually sound a little bit negative, but I'm going to ask you, is it worth the time and effort to create something like your podcast channel when it is for work? I'm not saying that you shouldn't be doing it, but the amount of work that goes into starting a podcast channel, I can tell you, is quite a lot. After you've done it a few times, then it becomes second nature and it's very, very easy. But if you've never done it before, then there's quite a lot of work that goes into it. And you'll find that you procrastinate several times, and then eventually you'll get around to doing it. You'll put in many hours creating the idea, creating the artwork for the podcast, working out what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, into which microphone you're going to use when you're speaking, and all of these different things. Now, the people who are going to be listening to it will no doubt be thinking to themselves, do I really want to be listening to this podcast channel at all? Your competition when it comes to your podcast channel isn't going to be other podcasts in the same kind of bracket, because you have to recognize that when people are listening to it, even though it's for work, they're going to be listening to it in their spare time. Nobody's ever going to sit in their office with a pair of headphones on, listening to you talking about your product or service or whatever it is that you supply the world with. Let's imagine for a moment that you're an accountant. Then you may well have podcast content on how to file your tax return, what kind of things HMRC in the UK or the IRS in the US are looking at when you file your tax return, how to avoid an inspection because they take a lot of time, things like that. Now, content like this, nobody's ever going to listen to during their working hours. So they're going to be listening to this probably in one of 3 places: when they're in the gym, when they're walking the dog, and when they're driving to work in the car. All of these 3 occasions are leisure time, which means that your competition is essentially the radio or them listening to Taylor Swift or anything else that they want to listen to on Spotify. Now, because of that, you may well be thinking to yourself that when your podcast launches, it's going to be an overnight success. I can tell you it probably won't be, I'm afraid to say. This sounds like a very negative video that I'm sharing with you right now. It probably won't be an overnight success. Instead, you'll probably find that very, very few people listen to it. Now, sure, in the opening stages, in the first episodes that you record and release, it's quite normal for the listenership to be quite low. But then you might be thinking, well, it's going to climb, it's going to build and build, and it just needs extra time, and then more and more people will be listening to it. But the sad truth, actually, is that if it's a podcast that people don't necessarily really want to listen to, but they feel like they should listen to it, then it probably won't grow all that much. You may well find that after a year of producing podcast content, your numbers are still much, much lower than you ever wanted them to be. If, however, your podcast channel is going to be for fun, maybe it's a podcast on something that you're into. Maybe you're into model aircraft. If you're into model aircraft or movies or music or woodwork or chopping wood or anything at all like that, if that's your passion, if that's your baby, then you don't need to worry about the amount of work that you're putting into it. Because if you're not doing it for a financial return, you're not doing it for a lead into sales or anything like that in your business, and you're not trying to generate a huge following so that you can monetize your podcast channel by having sponsorship or advertising or anything at all like that. If it's all just about the fun and the passion that you have for that particular subject, then absolutely go for it. It doesn't matter how much time you spend on it because you're doing it for fun in the first place, which just means that you can enjoy the process while you're doing it. There is no opportunity cost because this is your downtime. This is your way of relaxing. This is your way of immersing yourself in that thing that you really enjoy doing. So if it's going to be for fun, then go for it and don't worry at all about it. If it's going to be for work, then do ask yourself, will people listen to it? Is this going to be worth my effort putting into this to create it, to try to get people to listen to it? Should I be spending this time doing something else to grow my business instead of this thing? Now, the second thing that you need to ask yourself is, am I deeply passionate about this subject? And this is a really important question. And you might think that you know the answer to this. And one half of the answer you probably do know. Because if you're not deeply passionate about this particular thing, then that's going to come across when you're recording your content. If you're an accountant, let's go back to that example, and let's say you're not really enjoying your life as an accountant, you're wishing that you'd gone into a completely different career, you're no longer passionate about accountancy, then you may well find that your content on a podcast recording is just not going to come through loud and clear like you are deeply passionate about it. You've heard about infectious enthusiasm, and actually one of my favorite statistics is that people would rather listen to someone talking about something that they're not interested in, but it's being done in an enthusiastic way, as opposed to listening to someone who's talking about something that they are deeply excited about, but they're doing it in a very negative way. Well, if you're not deeply passionate about that thing yourself, then it's very hard, it's impossible to come across as enthusiastic and passionate about it. So you'll be switching your audience off before they even switch on in the first place. Now, that's the first half of it. The second half is a word of warning for you, because if you are deeply passionate about that thing, and if you are keen to be talking about it the whole time, then you may well find that because you're now recording podcast content about it, that thing that you're passionate about, that leisure time activity, it starts to become more work related instead of a pleasurable pastime, and therefore the enjoyment that you used to get from it starts to fade and go away. I'll tell you a quick story. When 15 years ago, I started doing photography and video. I used to enjoy doing it at the weekends, and people said, "Hey, Simon, you're really good at this. You should do this like professionally." And at the time I had a marketing job, and I loved the idea of doing this. I mean, because I loved taking photographs, and the idea of doing it professionally and getting paid for it, that sounded like an awesome thing to do. It really did. So I started to do that. And every other photographer who I knew said to me, be careful, because you will stop enjoying it as a hobby. You'll stop doing it for fun. You'll stop taking photographs of your friends and family, because I was always the person who had the camera at the weekend at that family event, at that friends gathering. And they said to me that you'll stop doing that. And I said, no, I won't. I really, really won't. I love taking photographs. Nothing's going to stop me from doing that. And sure enough, I found that when my diary got filled taking photographs for other people, then I'd get to the weekend and I just wanted to put the camera down. And it was right that I did so, because otherwise I'd be turning up for work again on a Monday morning, not looking forward to picking the camera up. So it is important to have that break. But it did take away that passion, that enthusiasm for it as a hobby. So do be careful about the fact that if you want to turn your passion, your hobby, into your work, then it may well stop being your passion and your hobby. Now, the last thing to talk about with this is, are you planning on recording solo content on your podcast, or are you planning on having different guests on every episode? Right now, I'm talking to you as a solo person, but this is for a YouTube video. It's a little bit different. For a podcast, if it's just one person who's talking one episode after the next, after the next, after the next, you may well find that your audience rocks up because they want to hear you, first of all, but then they'll find very quickly that even if you're the most interesting person in the world, they'll kind of start to get a little bit bored of you. And I don't mean that as a personal attack on you. I don't know who you are at all. But if your audience is showing up for episode after episode and it's always you, then that just naturally makes it less interesting. However, compare this with the opposite, which is that you always have different guests on, and the guests that you bring on, they have a different vibe to you. They have a different way of talking. They have different life experience. They can always bring new stories, new experiences, new ideas that pop into their heads, new ideas, therefore, that pop into the heads of your listeners, your audience. So do consider about who can be good guests to bring onto your podcast channel. And please, whatever you do, don't think to yourself that it would be a good podcast if it's just you talking alone every time. It's easiest that way, for sure, because you can record whenever you want to. You're not at the beck and call of when somebody else might be available. So in that sense, it's easier. On the other hand, though, it's a lot harder because you have to think about everything that's going to be said. Whereas if you bring on a guest, you can ask them a question and then you hand the mic over to them, and now you're listening and they're actually doing the work, talking about their thing. Of course, to them, it's not real work because they're talking about the thing that they naturally know a lot about. So it's not like you're handing this work across to somebody else, because what might be difficult for you would be easy for them. Let's use the accountant example. Maybe the accountant brings on, for one particular episode, a business coach. Now, the business coach is going to be very willing to be on a podcast episode because there's going to be future business opportunity for them being exposed to your audience. So if the accountant is wanting to know how a business coach would advise someone grows their business, well, the accountant would probably struggle to come up with all of that content themselves. But if they ask the business coach for their top 3 recommendations, how a solopreneur could grow their business, well, a business coach is going to know that without doing any research, preparation, or anything else. So what's difficult for one person is easy for another person. What's boring to the audience could also be turned into something much more exciting for the audience. Now, chances are, as I come to the end of this video, that you're not watching this because nobody's here watching this. But that's not the point. The point really is just for me to record this content, to get this other video number 5, recorded, edited, and published and shared with the outside world. Thank you for being here and watching. Simon, future Simon, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.